12 Rules series. We are going to look at the middle portion of rule number 2 today. But first, let's review the first portion of rule number 2. So, rule number 2 is I'm having the problem again. Here it is. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. So, the first section was, why won't you take your damn pills? And it asked the question, why do people take care of their dogs better than they take care of themselves? And the answer that Jordan Peterson was talking about had something to do with shame. Shame. So our question really is, where does shame come from? And how can we understand the world and reality in a way that does not make us feel bad about ourselves? So the next section spoke of the oldest story and the nature of the world. The oldest story comes from the book of Genesis in the Bible. And Jordan Peterson was referring mostly to the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which includes all of the stories of Adam and Eve and their descendants. And he points out that there are certain basic assumptions that people in the ancient world held that are different from modern people. Modern people like us believe that the universe is a matter of objects, physical reality, atoms, molecules, chemistry, physics. But in the ancient world, they visualized reality as action, things you do and things you must fight with in order to survive. And Jordan Peterson pointed out that the three most basic aspects of reality were chaos, order, and consciousness. And consciousness is the one that helps us to make sense of our lives. So that brings us to the portion of the chapter that begins with the words chaos and order, personality, male and female. So I'll advance to that place. Here we are. So, let us begin. In this lesson today, I would like to go a little deeper rather than going broad in our reading. I am not going to try to finish Rule 2. Rather, we are going to read more deeply and be sure we understand all of the paragraphs. So let's see how that works out. Okay. Chaos and order are two of the most fundamental elements of lived experience. So we are back to, is reality material or is it experience? From a material standpoint, the most fundamental would be atoms and molecules, but from a lived experience perspective, we have chaos and order. And last week, we spoke broadly about how chaos represents everything we do not know and cannot control in our experience. And order refers to everything we understand and can control. These are the two most basic subdivisions of being itself. Being. What does it mean to be an alive human being, an entity in this universe? The two most basic subdivisions of being are order and chaos. But order and chaos are not things or objects, and they are not and they are not experienced as things or objects. We do not experience order as an object or chaos as an object. Things or objects are part of the objective world. They're inanimate, spiritless, and dead. That's things. This is not true of chaos and order. So chaos and order are not inanimate, spiritless, or dead. Chaos and order are perceived, experienced, and understood as personalities. Chaos and order are perceived as personalities. We need to go deeper into that. And that is just as true of the perceptions. Hold on. Experiences and understanding of modern people as of their ancient forebears. It's just that moderners don't notice. Okay, so chaos and order are perceived as entities that are alive, both by modern people like you and me and by the ancients. But we in the modern world don't really notice this. We don't think of it consciously. Moving on. He is going to get into this more deeply in a few paragraphs. So let's continue with his words. Order and chaos are not understood first. I'm having a problem with my pen. It's funny, the screen has become somewhat non-responsive. Wait, it might be okay now. Okay. Order and chaos are not understood first objectively and then personified. By first and then, he is talking about chronology. The first thing you perceive is not an object which you later personify as a personality. No. Perception of things as tools, for example, occurs before we perceive things as objects. We see what things mean as faster than we see what they are. So, Jordan is making an example. He says, when you see something like this, the first thing you see is a writing instrument, a tool. That's what this means. Secondly, you would understand it as an object. So we see something's use more quickly than we see its identity as a thing. He moves on to say that perception of things as entities with personality also occurs before the perception of them as a thing. So if you see your mother, you first see her as the person that she is. Secondly, you would see her as an object, a physical, material, animal, or whatever. We interact with things based on their utility, their identity as people. We see their soul before we see that they are a body. This is particularly true of the action of others, living others. But we also see the non-living, objective world as animated. I will give you an example. If you are walking across the room and your brother's foot gets in the way and you trip and fall, your first thought is, he tripped me, maybe. He did this. Similarly, if you are walking outside during wind and a tree falls down and threatens to hit you, the first thought is, it almost hit me. It tried. It was aimed at me. Or, alternatively, if something happens, even a natural disaster, human beings will tend to say, why me, Lord? Why did you do this to me? Why did it have to be me that was hit by the flood, or that was struck by lightning, or that got hit by a tree limb that fell? So we tend to see the objective world as animated with personality because of something called the hyperactive agency detector in our brains. We have within us a sense that the world, the objective world and reality, has personality and intention. So we think things that happen to us, our first thought is that there was intention behind it. And this is because, according to Jordan Peterson, in our earliest evolution, we understood reality as having personality. And we understood that we had to fight with other people and other animals in order to survive, not just with inanimate things. So this hyperactive agency detector in our brains anthropomorphizes nature, makes nature seem like it is personal. So he says, we evolved over millennia with intensely social circumstances. So the most significant elements of our environment of origin were personalities, not objects. One moment. The personalities we've evolved to perceive have been around in predictable form and in typical hierarchical configurations forever, for all intents and purposes. For all intents and purposes is a phrase that means practically speaking. As a practical matter, it's been here forever. Not technically, but for all reasonable uses, yes. The personalities we have evolved to perceive have been around in predictable form, in typical hierarchical configuration forever. They have been male or female for 1 billion years, and that's a long time. The division of life into its twin sexes occurred before the evolution of multicellular animals. It was in a still respectable 1/5 of that time that mammals, who take extensive care of their young, emerged. Thus, the category of parent and child has been around for 200 million years. So that's really long. The male-female is the oldest, and parent and child is really old, 200 million years compared to 1 billion years. So, parent and child as categories in our mind evolved before the birds existed, before the flowers, a very long time. It's plenty long enough, so it's plenty of time for male and female, parent and child, two conceptions, to serve as vital and fundamental parts of the environment to which we have adapted. That means male and female, parent and child are categories for us, natural categories, deeply embedded in our perceptual, emotional, and motivational structures. So he is saying that all of life evolved in a social environment where it had to compete for survival with other life. And one of the earliest realities was the division of male and female. And one of the also earliest was the division of parent and child. These categories are deeply embedded in the structures of our brains and in our collective understanding. Our brains are deeply social. Our brains have evolved to be social on a deep level. Other creatures, especially humans, were very important to us as we lived, mated, and evolved. Those creatures were literally our natural habitat, our environment. So our environment was the social community more than it was the trees and rocks and sky. We contended with other living beings for dominance and for territory. The material universe was less important as we were evolving. All this is from a Darwinian perspective. So from the Darwinian perspective, nature, reality itself, the environment, is what selects. The environment cannot be defined in any more fundamental manner. So as we evolve, we are adapting ourselves to the environment. And the creature which adapts itself most successfully, which does the best job of adapting to the environment, continues. This is the direction of evolution. And what is the environment? The environment is not inert matter. It is whatever we contend with, whatever we have to fight for existence when we are striving to survive and reproduce. And a lot of that environment is other beings, their opinions of us, and their communities. And that's that. By saying, and that's that, he is saying this is a fundamental fact that cannot be changed or argued against. You must accept the fact that the environment that human beings evolved to be a match for was a social environment with dominance hierarchies, with male and female, and with parent and child. These realities, these understandings are at the most basic ground of our psychology and our understanding of the world and our fitness, our adaptation to reality. Moving on. Over the millennia, as our brain capacity increased, as we were evolving, and we developed curiosity to spare. Curiosity to spare. When we say to spare, it's a phrase that means we have lots and enough and more than we need. So technically, we needed a certain amount of curiosity to learn how to stay alive. But eventually, as we got smarter and smarter, we had enough intelligence to survive and also to wonder about larger realities. So we had opportunity to start thinking about reality outside of our small community. In other words, we began to start probing into chaos. So, over the millennia, as our brain capacity increased and we developed curiosity to spare, we became increasingly aware of and curious about, you keep those words together, aware of and curious about the nature of the world and what we eventually conceptualized as the objective world, outside the personalities of family and troop. So he is saying our first conception is family and troop, family and gang or family group. And then the objective world outside of that. And outside is not merely unexplored physical territory. outside is outside of what we currently understand, but keep in mind the assumption of the ancients is that reality is social. Reality is about action and stories and conflicts and winners and losers. So, understanding is dealing with and coping with, not merely representing objectively. So, remember, it is not about understanding things as objects, it is about understanding social dynamics. So we have curiosity to spare about what is outside of our family. In other words, other cultures, other groups, family groups, other animals that we might have to fight for survival, not other types of trees and rocks and climate. Okay, but our brains had been long concentrating on other people. Long in this context means for a long time, evolutionarily, our brains were concentrating on other people. Thus it appears that we first began to perceive the unknown and chaotic non-human world with the innate categories of our social brain. So, as we are evolving, we now have enough brain power to be curious about relating to personalities outside of our own family. We begin to probe into chaos, and we understand everything in the categories that we have already evolved: male and female, parent and child. Those are the two that he has given us so far. And even this is a misstatement. When we first began to perceive the unknown, chaotic, and non-animal world, we used categories that had originally evolved to represent the pre-human animal social world. Our minds are far older than humanity. So our earliest perceptions were not about humans. They were about a pre-human relating. Our categories are far older than our species. Our most basic category, as old in some sense as the sexual act itself, appears to be that of sex, male and female. Male and female is the oldest perceived reality of life. We appear, when he says we appear to, or something appears to be, something appears to be, it means he does not have proof of this, but that in his knowledge of evolution and psychology, this is how it seems to him. So it seems to him that we have taken that primordial knowledge, that early knowledge from before we were even human, that primordial knowledge of structured creative opposition, that would be male and female, and begun to interpret everything through its lens. So, have you ever wondered why many languages have male and female forms for things that are not biological? A mountain, or the sky, or the earth. This is part of that appearance that he is talking about. We appear to have taken the primordial knowledge of structured creative opposition and begun to interpret everything through its lens. So if the language has certain things being female and certain things being male, that is an expression of this fundamental dichotomy that goes to the root of our perceptions. Moving on. Order. appears to be symbolically associated with masculinity. Remember, we have order and chaos. And order is everything we understand and can control. That is associated with masculinity. Also the yang of the Tao. Perhaps, he's saying maybe, order is associated with masculinity. Maybe because the primary hierarchical structure of human society is masculine, as it is among most animals, including chimpanzees, who are our closest genetic and behavioral match. It is because men are, and throughout history have been, builders of towns and cities, engineers, stonemasons, bricklayers, lumberjacks, and operators of heavy machinery. Order is God the Father, the eternal judge, the ledger keeper. Ledger is a book where you write down how much was purchased, how much was spent. And in the mythology of Christianity or of Islam, of many religions, there is a ledger in heaven, our good deeds against our bad deeds. Dispenser of rewards and punishments. Order, masculine order, is the peacetime army of policemen and soldiers. He is again in this paragraph doing what he did in the last section, simply giving a list of images to evoke an idea of masculinity and order and the kinds of things that seem to fall in that category in the human psyche. The political culture, the corporate environment, the system. It is the they in you know what they say. You know what they say. My thing stopped working. Here we go. You know what they say. That's a phrase we use in English. I don't know if you have it in your language. What people will say is a fearful concept for us. We want people to say good things of us and not bad. And what people say tends to be the law of behavior for the culture. So it is the they, and you know what they say. Masculinity and order. Credit cards, classrooms, supermarket checkout lineups, turn taking turns. All of these things are ordered, and if you don't have them, you have chaos. Traffic lights, red, yellow, green. Go on green, stop on red. Familiar routes of daily commuters. And both order and chaos have a downside. Order, when pushed too far, when taken too far, when imbalanced, can also manifest itself destructively and terribly. Concentration camps, forced migration, the goose step. The goose step is the way the Nazi soldiers in Germany marched 1, 2, 3, 4 with their feet. Goose step. This is order taken too far, and it is frightening. This is the Nazis. On the other hand, we have chaos, the unknown. We tend to think of order as good and chaos as bad. But both order and chaos have good sides and bad sides. They are not in themselves good and bad, any more than masculine and feminine are good and bad. Each one has strengths and weaknesses. So, chaos is symbolically associated with the feminine. This is partly because all the things we have come to know were born originally of the unknown, born of mothers. Chaos is mater, origin, source, mother, materia, the substance from which all things are made. Chaos is what matters. What matters is what is important. What is the matter means what is happening to you that is big and huge and significant and usually bad. Okay. What is the matter? What is the matter means what is important and bad that is happening to you. Chaos is the very subject matter of thought and communication. In its positive guise, chaos is possibility itself. It is the opportunity for something new, the source of ideas, the mysterious realm of gestation and birth. We don't understand it. It's where new stuff comes from chaos. But it has a downside. As a negative force, it is the impenetrable darkness of a cave and the accident by the side of the road. It is whatever hits you unexpectedly to destroy your life or change your life. It is the mother grizzly. A grizzly is a kind of bear, a very big bear that can stand 9 feet tall, I think. Very dangerous bear. Mother grizzly, all compassion to her cubs, but who marks you as a potential predator and tears you to pieces. So chaos is dangerous, but valuable. Chaos is the eternal feminine. It is also the crushing force of sexual selection. This is the big area of chaos for many men. Women are choosy maters. To mate means to have sex with, to marry, to have children with, to become a mate, to become a spouse. Women are choosy. Choosy means selective. Choosy means not easy to please. Unlike female chimps, their closest animal counterparts, apparently chimps will take any male. No problem. You're male, let's mate. Not women. Most men do not meet female human standards. Most men are not good enough for most women. Here comes an example. On dating sites, websites for dating, women rate 85% of the men as below average in attractiveness. That means only 15% of men are considered attractive to women on dating sites. For this reason, we all have twice as many female ancestors as male. So what this means is, if you are able to check the DNA patterns to find out who was the father of, certain people, you will find that a relatively few males were the fathers of all the people today. For example, I read once that Genghis Khan is in the ancestral pattern of a huge proportion of Asia. A third of Asia descended from Genghis Khan, because he went across Asia his entire life, conquering villages and impregnating all the women. So there are many men who don't get to reproduce compared to females. It's rather hard to find a woman who is willing to reproduce with you as a human. So that's the meaning of all of this. Imagine that all the women who have ever lived have averaged one child, and half the men who have ever lived fathered 2 children, if any, while the other half fathered none. Okay, so that's the meaning of all this. It is woman as nature who looks at half of the men and says, no. Remember, nature is what we are adapted to. Nature selects. So it is woman as nature that looks at half of all men and says no. And that is a direct encounter with chaos for the men. And it occurs with devastating force every time a man is turned down for a date. Every time a man asks a woman to go out with him and she says no, this is a conflict with nature for the man and a conflict with chaos, something he cannot understand and cannot control. Chaos is feminine. Human female choosiness is why we are very different from the common ancestor we share with the chimps. Female chimps will mate with anyone, but female women require only the very best. Therefore, human evolution was directed. Women's proclivity to say no, the fact that women say no more than any other force, has shaped our evolution into the creative, industrious, upright, large-brained, competitive, aggressive, domineering creatures that we are. So because human women are so selective, our evolution has tended us toward being creative, industrious, hardworking. Upright means moral. Large-brained, intelligent creatures that we are. It is nature as woman who says, well, bucko, you're good enough for a friend, but my experience of you so far has not indicated the suitability of your genetic material for continued propagation. I always thought it was strange when I was younger if a man would ask me out and I would say, let's be friends. And he would be unhappy and miserable. I never understood why let's be friends was so terrible. But now I understand. Let's be friends means you are not good enough to reproduce. It's huge. I'm going to, let's see. I'm going to more or less skip this next paragraph. It talks about the religious symbols relying on this fundamental duality. You can read this yourself. Let's see. Okay, down at the bottom of that page, starting here, it should also be noted finally that the structure of the brain itself at a gross morphological level appears to reflect this duality. We have two hemispheres of the brain. It's actually huge if you accept what Jordan Peterson is saying, that we evolved in this social environment, understanding the world as a duality between male and female, conflicting forces, chaos and order, and it literally developed into two hemispheres of the brain. That is what he is saying. This, to me, indicates the fundamental, beyond metaphorical, not just metaphorical, but actually material reality of this symbolically feminine-masculine divide, since the brain is adapted by definition to reality itself, evolutionarily speaking. A certain neuropsychologist, Elkanan Goldberg, a student of the neuropsychologist Alexander Luria, proposed that the hemispheric structure of the brain reflects the division between novelty. Novelty means stuff that is brand new, which is kind of like unknown or chaos, and routinization, meaning the known and order. So these two neurophysicists are suggesting that the two hemispheres of the brain are directly related to the unknown and the known, to chaos and order, and even, metaphorically, to masculine and feminine. He doesn't make reference to the symbols representing the structure of the world in reference to this theory, but that's even better. An idea is more credible when it emerges as a consequence of investigations in different realms. So he is not all about the psychology of the images in literature and culture, the way psychologist Jordan Peterson is, but he comes to the same conclusion. Okay, so next paragraph. We know this, but we don't know it. We immediately comprehend it when it is explained. Everyone understands order and chaos when it's explained in this matter, the known versus the unknown, etc. That is why we understand the strange, surreal stories like Pinocchio and Sleeping Beauty and The Lion King and The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, with their eternal landscapes of known and unknown, world and underworld. We have all been in both places many times, sometimes by happenstance, coincidence, sometimes by choice. I won't say much about these stories he mentions, except to tell you that in some cases the Disney versions have changed the stories quite a lot. And if you want to study literature, you have to go to the original stories. Do not rely on Disney animated cartoons of these stories. You won't get what he's talking about in these stories. Okay. Many things begin to fall into place when you begin to consciously understand the world in this manner. Fall into place means puzzle pieces. We begin to understand and say, oh yeah, that's why this is true, and that's why that happens. Okay, moving on. This knowledge is prescriptive as well as descriptive. It tells you how to live. Once you understand the world in these, he is now going to begin to move into how we can work against chaos in our lives. We eternally inhabit order surrounded by chaos. We occupy the known territory, and out there is the unknown. We are adapted, Darwinian evolution, we are adapted to this structure of order and chaos, yin and yang. Chaos and order make up the eternal, transcendent environment to which we are adapted. And we must straddle this fundamental reality. Straddle means put one foot on one side of a fence and the other foot on the other side. In the yin and yang, you have a path between light and dark, between order and chaos. And the path is the path of life and behavior, and it eternally skirts chaos on one side and order on the other. We must be located precisely at the point of tension between chaos and order. That is where we are in the right place at the right time, and we have a sense of meaning. Almost done here. Hold on. And almost out of time. One moment. Okay. Chaos and order are fundamental elements because every lived situation is made up of both. No matter where you are, there are some parts of it that you can identify, make use of, and predict, and other things you neither know nor understand. No matter who you are, a Kalahari desert dweller, a Wall Street banker, some things are under your control, some things are not. That's why all human beings can understand the same stories. Order is not enough. You have to also have chaos. If you had no chaos, you would never learn and grow. If you had no order, you would go crazy. You have to have both, and you have to be in balance, living mostly with order, but with enough chaos that you are growing and expanding. Then you have positioned yourself where the terror of existence is under control, and you are secure, but where you are also alert and engaged. That is where there is something new to master and some way you can be improved. That is where meaning is to be found. So that's where we will end today. See you next time.